Well, good afternoon. So good to see you all. Thank you for staying for our afternoon program. We're very pleased to have this workshop on microaggressions and how to intervene, and that it is being facilitated by Meg Tuccillo. So thank you so much for being here. In a moment, Gail is going to share a little bit more about Meg, so you can learn more about her, but we're just so pleased to have you. As far as our program goes, I want to give you a sense of what to expect. So we will have first a workshop presented by Meg for about 25 or 30 minutes, and then we will move to small group discussions for about 30 minutes as well, and then we'll gather back together and we will do Q&A and some closing comments that Drew will make before we disperse. So let us begin with prayer. I want to share a prayer that comes from this book, Black Liturgies, Cole Arthur Riley. You've heard me use this book in worship before, but this is a prayer called For Solidarity. So let us pray. God of solidarity, thank you for being a God who enters the suffering of the world, who doesn't run from those in pain, but rushes to the sight of blood and tears. Release us from those empty cravings for unity that come at no cost to the oppressor. Lead us toward spaces of costly advocacy. We confess that in speaking up on behalf of the oppressed, we too soon become enamored with the sound of our own voices. Our egos spoil even our best intentions. Show us when the voices of the vulnerable are being drowned out by the cacophony of the privileged. Make our presence and dignity known in a world that perpetually eclipses the voices of the marginalized. Guide us into solidarity that demands something of us. Let us learn to risk ourselves on behalf of the vulnerable, believing that when one of us is harmed, we all are. And God, keep us from those who will demonize the fight in us, who would prefer us complacent and far from one another. Secure in us the courage to resist, knowing that together we will restore what the world has tried to suffocate in us. Amen. Gail? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Gail Perry, and I have the honor of introducing Meg Tuccillo this afternoon. Meg is well known in the education community in Virginia, especially in Arlington County and Arlington Public Schools. She's been part of the foundation of Arlington Public Schools for a long time. Currently, Meg is the American Association University Women's Co-Vice Chair for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Meg retired from Arlington Public Schools after serving as Assistant Superintendent for Administrative Services for 17 years. Prior to that time, she was principal of Abingdon and Tuccillo Elementary Schools. If I recall correctly, every time the superintendent needed somebody to pick up a job that for whatever reason was empty, Meg was the person that came to the rescue. So she's had a lot of jobs in Arlington Public Schools. She is the chair of the Arlington Community Foundation Workforce Development Committee, past president of Arlington chapter of AAUW, a founding member of the Partnership for Children, Youth and Families, and a member of the Partnership Foundation and member of the Second Chance Advisory Board. So everybody knows Meg in Arlington, I would say. So I'm happy to welcome to the podium, or to the stand, Meg Tuccillo, who's going to talk to us today about microaggressions.
I have my own mic. So the only problem with doing lots of different things was in grocery stores when we were doing boundary changes for schools, people would approach me and say, you're the one making my child go to a different school, and my own kids would just kind of walk away. So, yeah, I've been a lot of things. And I do need to share with you as well, I am the co-vice chair for diversity, equity, inclusion, and we include belonging in there for the state, for AAUW. But when they asked me to do it, I said, what kind of diversity is this that you're asking me to be the diversity person? And I would only do it if I co-chaired with another person. So a professor at Norfolk State and I do it together, and we have learned from each other, and it's been a very valuable experience to be doing that together. All right, so I understand that Gail has been sharing some information. You have had some prep work on this topic, and it's nothing earth-shattering, but this is an opportunity for us to talk together. And it's partly about being aware of being sensitive about what we say and do and act, as well as what to do when you observe it or are involved in it or witness something happening. So, the title is Microaggressions in Our World. Microaggressions are like mosquito bites. I'm going to come back to that at the end. Remind me if I forget. And just always in presentations, this is just a land acknowledgement. I don't know if you do that, but we do that in a number of different places, and just acknowledge the land that we're on and recognizing with respect the indigenous peoples who were here before us. I'm one ahead of myself every time. So the definition of terms, and this is going to take a little bit of time just to look at. Some of these you know, some of these you've heard, but just to look at, and there are variations on the definitions as well, but for now, diversity. There are many different people, identities, experiences, perspectives, approaches in my organization or committee or church or community. Inclusion, we identify that as I invite valid, rational, non-dominant opinions, views in my world. Equity, I address biases that lead to the dominance or invisibility of different whatevers, people's views in my world. And justice, I challenge policies that reinforce the dominance or invisibility of different people's voices, whatever, in my world. And right now in your world, that may be an important aspect of speaking up for justice as a whole. Other key terms, minority, and this definition talks about the group having little power or representation relative to other groups in a society, however that might be. And minoritized is the social processes of power and domination rather than just existing in distinct statistical minorities. So that's power. And some people say the letters BIPOC or BIPOC, and that's the shorter version these days for Black, Indigenous, people of color, and that's sometimes used in literature that you will notice as well. Okay, that's some of the basics. What happened? Here we are. In our discussions today, we're going to talk about key terms, and these are racism that we've spoken about, interpersonal racism happening individually. You might see it in a setting between two people, or you may be part of that small interpersonal conversation that results in that racism. Institutional racism is that what we see so unfortunately often, instances where institutional racism is built into a structure and it's somewhat accepted. And discrimination is whatever the unfair treatment is, and this is an example of a person with a disability being yelled at. But it could be about anything. Could be about sex, could be language, could be your country of origin, your religion. Whatever that is included in your description of discrimination. And I'm just going to say, in our world right now, there are so many examples of discriminatory behaviors and racist and unjust behaviors happening and statements being made, that this is all part of what we need to worry about. Okay. So we're going to talk about racial microaggressions for a little bit here. And I apologize for having to read it, but I can't. I don't think you can see it. So I'm reading it as much for your benefit, okay? So racial microaggressions are commonplace, and I'll give you some examples in a little bit. Commonplace verbal or behavioral indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, which communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial slights and insults. And it happens more often than we want to admit, and we don't always even recognize it when it's happening. So the kinds that you might encounter include micro-insult, and that's a behavioral or verbal remark, a specific remark, or comments that convey rudeness, insensitivity, or demean a person's racial identity or heritage or background. Those are micro-insults. Micro-assaults are explicit racial well, it's not derogatory. Derogatory remarks characterized primarily by violent or verbal or nonverbal attack. So that's an assault. That's where we see individuals in someone else's face, just pushing on them. Micro-invalidation, which is often conscious and meant to have the effect that it has. Verbal comments or behaviors that exclude, negate, or nullify the psychological thoughts, feelings, or experiences of a person of color. Again, I'm going to give you some examples. These are just the definitions right now. And then micro-exclusion, often unconscious, the omission or lack of presence of people of color in real and symbolic locales that serve to facilitate perceptions of exclusion. A prime example was when I was being asked to be the DEI person. It comes down to being a micro-exclusion, just eliminating that part of our community. So you probably can give examples yourself, but I'll give some to get us started about micro-insults. You speak good English. You are so articulate. I was at an AAUW meeting this year, American Association of University Women care about the rights of others, and particularly women. And a young woman was giving a talk, and she was from Guatemala, and she was talking about her experience. And the host of the event, when she finished, that's what she said. "You're so articulate." Sometimes you need to speak up right at the moment, and sometimes you need to address the person pulling them aside. It depends. And so I waited till she was done, but the young woman was still there, and I spoke to the host, and I said, "Do you realize how that feels?" And she was like, "Oh my goodness, I had no idea, I didn't mean that at all." Well, you have to be conscious of the impact of your words if you are validly trying to be the best you can be. Words matter. And naively saying statements that have an impact on the other person. So I spoke to the host, and then I went over to the young woman, and I said, appreciate everything that you shared, and I just want you to know that I spoke to the other woman about that statement and she said, "Oh, I get it all the time." It shouldn't happen. Because when you say, you speak good English, it means you're not American, you're doing okay for who you are, or you're so articulate. Boy, that's really amazing that someone from your background or from your country can speak English so well. Micro-invalidations. So an example is, oh my gosh, and I had a teacher who said this all the time. My best friend is black, so I can't be racist. And this woman was racist. And I can't imagine who her friend was. Or saying, as a woman, I know what you go through as a person of color. It's the same kind of thing. I have friends of color, so I'm immune, so I can't be racist, and that covers me. I'm all fine. Or your racial oppression is not any different than my gender oppression, so I can't be racist. Step back and think about what you're saying, person. And then microassault. And this happens too, and you've probably seen it. A security guard following a black person, presuming that they are going to cause damage or steal something. And the implication is you're a criminal, you're going to steal, you're poor, you don't belong here, you're dangerous. I was with a friend last summer at Rehoboth, and all the different shops along the boardwalk and everything else. And my friend's granddaughter is biracial. She's 11 or 12. And she wanted to go in one of the little shops, along the way, and we were in a different shop. And so she went in by herself. And my friend and I went in, and indeed, the owner of the shop is like right behind this little girl. And she was the only person of color in the store. And the person is just kind of hovering almost over this 11-year-old little girl. And when the grandmother, white woman, walked over, the man backed away immediately. And just so obvious that this is what this owner of this store does when a person of color comes in, or a person who isn't white walks into their store. So we had a conversation with him as well, and told him we were telling all of our friends about what happened, and they wouldn't be shopping in this store anymore either. And he was very apologetic, and when he tried to say, I was just worried that she was alone and maybe she needed to be taken care of. Yeah, right. Not true. So many examples. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you to just talk among yourselves about, well, whether you've had that happen or you've observed it yourself. So when this happens, and when my friend's 11-year-old little granddaughter had this experience, or when this person who was talking at the AAUW meeting has this experience, we can't live their life and understand the impact that it has. But research has shown that some of the effects on the individuals who are the victims of microaggressions are, actual physical effects. They can get worn out, just depressed, reduced functioning, blood pressure, heart rate goes up if you're being treated this way. Diabetes, asthma, all those kinds of things that can be hidden effects of the impact of this person's words or actions on the victim. Cognitive disruption, diverted attention, impacting your learning, especially for young students when this is the sly approach that some adults might take in dealing with them in school. I just have to mention, I was saying to somebody on the way over here, I heard a report about a teacher in Baltimore this week. Oh my gosh. Monday was boycott day for students without documentation, not go to school to make a stand. And so these students in this high school in Baltimore got an excused absence to participate in this event. And the teacher recorded all of their names and posted it on X and linked it to the ICE link. That's pretty macro aggression. But the impact on these students, imagine, you know, fear impacting their ability to learn, their fear of going to school even. Anger, rage, depression, hopelessness, embarrassment. And some of the behavioral effects that you might see in individuals too include hypervigilance, skepticism, avoidance, disengagement, just sinking quiet, you know, not speaking up, sinking into the background, or being afraid to participate because of the way they've been treated in previous encounters. And that's what we're doing. So with a little bit of that background and some of the information that Gail shared with you, just maybe on your row or just turn around with some folks and just talk about for a minute one of the microaggression examples that we shared, and maybe talk about something you might not have realized or been sensitive to previously, or the impact of some of the things that you've heard people do or say. Or in your role at church or in your organization, how can you, what do you do when you see it, when you hear it? And we're going to talk more about that in a bit. We're just going to talk for a few minutes to get some juices going. So, did you see any examples you might not have thought about before, or are there examples that you have seen or observed or been part of? You know, we're such a small group. You want to just share anything, or with out loud? Oh, we don't have a microphone. Okay. Have you had any of these experiences with microaggressions? And yeah.
Guilty of them. I had a very good friend who I worked with who was black, and we were going out to lunch, and she finally pointed out to me that the wait staff was always asking me what I wanted, always asking, you know, when she ordered, the lady looked at me, and I didn't notice, but, and then also when the bill came, it came to me, so.
Gosh.
Well, I'm just guilty of the misplaced compliment, you know, what I thought would be an affirmation, you know, like, oh, you're so articulate, thinking that's supportive. So it's kind of like, I haven't heard that before. Compliments can be dangerous when you don't consider them before you speak them. So that's an eye-opener for me.
I think that the caveat of think before you... the caveat of thinking before you speak is important here. But here's a rule of thumb that I can share with you. You know, you're right. I'm sure the person's intention was you're articulate. Here's the rule of thumb to give you a guideline. Would you say the same thing to a person who looked a little bit differently or looked like you? Would you say, because sometimes, for example, a young person going up, a teenager, of Anglo-Saxon heritage goes up and does a great job at the pulpit and speaks, and you are so proud of him, okay? And you go up and say, you know, you're so articulate. I appreciate you sharing your feelings and experience. Wow, you're really something. But would you, if you wouldn't say it to a white person or a white group, then don't think twice or 3 times before you say it to somebody else of color, or phrase it a different way. Give it a compliment in a different way.
One of the things that I've been wondering about is the term microaggression. It seems like in general use, sometimes it's applied to white people, that I'm experiencing a microaggression. But as I'm understanding it in this presentation, that's limited only to people of color. Is that correct? No?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. No, a microaggression is something that you say or do unintentionally that has an impact on the other individual in a way that is demeaning or painful or embarrassing or whatever.
So in the micro-invalidation, where the example was a woman is comparing her experience to a person of color, then it's a microaggression.
Yeah, and I wouldn't worry about the,
Yeah.
you know, the definition, but it's not the same. Okay. And to say that, you know, it's the same thing, it doesn't validate the other person. I did just want to add, when you were talking about your restaurant, one year I bought my assistant principal wore a charm bracelet, and she was a woman of color, and she had this charm bracelet that she had acquired different charms over many, many years. And so I went to a jewelry store at Pentagon Mall, and bought her a charm and gave it to her for Christmas and discovered she already had that charm. So I said to her, well, just bring it back and you know, get one that you like. And she said, you do it first. So I went back to the jeweler and said, oh, no, wait, no. She went first. She went first. I'm sorry, I forgot this. It's a long time ago. She went first, and he would not return. He would not exchange it or do anything. He, I guess, assumed she had stolen it and was trying to get her money back or something. So she came back on Monday and she said, you know, that's what happened. And then she said, you go try it. He gave me my money back in a flash. Hardly any question asked. Ta-da. So he gave me the money back, and I said, do you remember that you had another customer in here a week ago? And he was like, oh, yeah. And I said, well, she and I will be telling everybody we know that you are not a person of value that we would have any communication with or buy anything in your store ever again, because it was invalidating my friend. So he was like, stop. But I bet it happens all the time. And my friend, my assistant principal, knew that's what was going to happen when she went. So, I mean, this is not, 80 years ago. This is maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago. We have a lot to do. And we have a responsibility, every one of us, regardless of color, race, ethnicity, we have a responsibility to be listening for it, observing it, acting on what we see. So, yeah.
Something you just said prompted me to want to offer this into the group, right?
Yeah.
That, and just putting in the context of where we are right now in our country, there are things that many of us have experienced and been experiencing that this isn't brand new. Mm-hmm. So my suggestion is, when people are feeling overwhelmed or stressed or what are we going to do, look to people who have already been living through oppression to say, you're familiar with this, aren't you?
Yeah, help me.
How do we deal with this, right? Because if you've been poor and hungry and they're threatening to take your SNAP benefits, you already know what you have to do to survive in that environment.
Yeah.
So when someone else is saying, oh my God, they're going to take our, yeah, well, join the rest of us for a little while.
Yeah.
We've been here, right? So that microaggression that on a mass scale is what many of us have lived through. So being able to be aware of that, because the opposite of that still sounds like privilege. Oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do because, well, you're going to do the same thing the rest of us have been doing that you haven't
Look
had
around.
to do
It's been happening.
forever, right? So it's kind of like understanding that now maybe people get it, how we're in the same boat, and many of us have been saying that all along. The purpose for women's lib, for civil rights, for LGBTQI rights were because we were not being treated the way other folks have been able to hide in their safety. And so now it's exposed, so now it's a place to say, this is what we who are progressive, you all who are progressive, have believed these things. Now it's a way we have to live into them, because now it's confronting you in a different way. Right?
Thank you for that. That was an important addition. I appreciate that. So I'm recognizing the time, too. What we're going to talk about now is what to do about it. And you kind of know what to do about it, but let's go through what this is called is the RAVEN approach, R-A-V-E-N, and H stand for a step to take. And there's a card that I will pass out that you can have and keep with you and refer to it or kind of think about it whenever you're out in public. And I will just say I've thought about the RAVEN approach. Sounds like, what's RAVEN? But you know the poem, Edgar Allan Poe, Nevermore. Raven saith the raven, nevermore. So that's my reason. Oh, wait, I don't need this. My reason for doing that. And so I will read it because you may not be able to. So, redirect, ask, share the values that this is involved in, emphasize what you have seen, and talk about next steps. So that's the RAVEN approach. Redirect, you hear it, somebody says it, you know, you're so articulate publicly. Intervene, correct, and pull aside. Redirect the interaction with the goal of immediately stopping the conversation further. Can I speak to you for a second? Do you mind if I talk to you one-on-one? I was in a meeting and a woman, oh my goodness, a woman was talking about driving somewhere in the South. And she said, and then I was driving in a scary black community. So I stopped her. This didn't go too well. But I stopped her and I said, well, a scary black community, what defines that? And do you say that, I mean, what's a scary white community? Or what's a scary community? And she said, well, you know what I mean. And I said to her, I really think I do know what you mean, and I don't think it's an appropriate statement to make about a community. So then she got mad at me, and she was yelling, and then she was crying. And then she left. But it was just. Maybe you opened her eyes anyway. What? Maybe you opened her eyes anyway. I don't know. I haven't seen her since. But if it, you know, speaking up in public can be a little bit daunting too. So either doing it at the moment or pulling the person aside. Oh, I don't have the mic. I'll get this.
Would you mind speaking to that last point just a little bit? When you said maybe you opened her eyes and you said I haven't seen her again, because what I think sometimes happens for us is that we're confronted with the stuff we don't want to know about ourselves. And so you did do something to her. You made her look at herself. Mm-hmm. What she chose to do with it later, we can't control. But I think that's what you all can do within your community as well, and what we all can do in all of our communities, because it's not just about race. So this could be about women's issues, it could be about LGBT, whatever, it could be about ageism, whatever it is, right? So we all can do this, and when we're confronting it, is just let it be what it is. I'm going to tell you that this is not, I don't think that's a healthy way to do this, and I'm bothered by this statement. What do you, but it's up to them to do something about it.
I agree with you, and I would feel we were getting further if I did see her again and could continue the engaging in the conversation, you know, just seeing where she is or how we might move forward. And I'm no perfect person either. I mean, she might tell me, you know, oh my God, you embarrassed me in front of everybody, you should, whatever. But yeah, I agree. And so the redirect, we've talked about that. That's how we might do it. And then ask, okay, were you probing and clarifying questions to help them understand the impact of their words and their statements. Were you suggesting, or what did you mean to say, or did you mean to suggest, or this is the one that is a protective clause for you. I think I heard you say, I wanted to make sure I understood what you were saying. Were you saying that? Whatever. So those kinds of phrases might help in the moment to keep the conversation moving a little bit. She didn't want to talk. Then values, clarifying that the organization or the business where you work or the school where you're teaching or the church where you are, that the values of that group don't align with what you just said. You know, it surprises me, or gosh, you know, here we are at church and I was surprised to hear you say that, knowing our values. Restating the values of respect and recognizing the value of each person, and you know, just making a positive statement about what are the values that you think should be present here. For example, what you just said is not in alignment or consistent with whatever, where we prioritize equity and inclusion, or we recognize the value of equity and inclusion, and what you just said just doesn't mesh with that, and I'd like to talk to you about it. And then emphasize your own thoughts and feelings and make it personal. And Gail, you remember in schools, we often talk about, you know, make an I statement. And when you're telling kids how to deal with a difficult behavior, you know, tell them how you feel, I feel. So when I hear your comment, I think or I feel, or many people might take that to mean, or in my experience, when someone says that, it makes someone feel whatever. So use the I statements, I think, I feel, describe specifically what your concerns are, express clearly the impact of the problem, and specify what your needs and wants. I'm not sure I love specify your needs and wants. That sounds like your own ego, but it's there. And then next steps, suggesting steps to help correct the behavior. Reflect and decide the next time you encounter this situation what you might consider doing. So if you realize later that, oh my gosh, this person said this and I didn't do anything, think about what you might do or might say, or come up with a phrase that feels comfortable for you to have it at your fingertips. Training, suggestions, reading, how to increase your awareness. And Gail has been sharing information with you, and I think there's even more about microaggressions. I'm looking. The team, or somebody. A handout. Okay. Okay. But, you know, if you do further reading, just, you know, Google microaggressions and how to deal with it and see if something hits you as being useful. So I'm going to share the microaggression cards for you to have. And just recognize that, as I said before, when you do address somebody and speak to someone, it might trigger anger, denial, guilt, freezing up, getting others to agree with them. Come on, folks, I didn't mean that. You knew that, right? You know, Meg's going crazy. And try and make it a mindful opportunity to learn from it. So recognize that that could happen, and recognize that you may have to deal with that. So you're going to talk about takeaways and where do we go and what do we do with it. But do you remember I said at the very beginning, I wanted to come back to the first statement. Okay. It took me a while. In doing this a couple of times, microaggressions in our world, microaggressions are like mosquito bites. That's a microaggression. It shouldn't be there. Think about it. Mosquito bite, it's gone. Flick it off, it might itch for a minute and it's gone. And you don't build on the same mosquito bite time after time. No big deal. Flick it off. More like cancer. Maybe it should be more like cancer. But I finally, in looking at this the 12th time, thought, that isn't right. So I humbly say to you that I committed a microaggression in having that as the opening statement, and I'm learning along with everybody else. So those cards that I just gave out reflect the the Raven approach. This is a second little card to have, and this is a little easier to carry around and have with you. And this is just stop. Bottom line, stop. Say something. Talk with the speaker about their words and their intent. Offer my reactions, the view on what was said, and plan for next step. S-T-O-P, stop. So between those two, hopefully there's something that triggers for you a way to act and engage when you come across or find yourself perpetrating a microaggression. Just recognize it in yourself, and when you hear and see it in someone else, feel empowered to act. Gail?
You may have heard the terms calling in and calling out.
Yeah.
That's similar to this.
Yeah.
Can't you hear me? Oh, I'm sorry. Oops. You may have heard the term calling in and calling out, which is similar to this. Calling in is saying to the person, can I speak to you after the meeting? And then talking to them like one-on-one in private to say, this is what my impact of the situation was, and I suggest you do blah, 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 whatever. Calling out is when you do just that. Say, hold it. Mm-hmm. In public, in front of other people. That's calling out. So this card should be very helpful.
Yeah, keep it.
Oh, thank you.
Keep it. I'll just give you one last calling out. I was in a store a while ago, in like an antique store. An old guy owned it. And I'm walking around looking at stuff, and a couple walk in, a couple of color. And he said, not too quietly, the owner said, what are those ends coming in here for? I was stunned, and it was loud enough that the other people in everybody heard it. And I said to him, I didn't do it too quietly either, because I had stuff in my hand that I was about to buy. And I put it down on the top of the counter, and I said, I can't believe you said that. I love this store, the things that are in the store, and now I can never shop here again because of your racist comments. And what is it that makes you think that you can say something like that, much less think it? How do you think that went? He laughed. Oh, well. But, so I threw my stuff down, and I walked out, but everybody else did too. So, in the moment, even though the guy might not get it, hopefully other people will. So, if I've had these experiences, and I'm just walking around in life, you have too. So let's all, and probably have acted very well in many of them. So let's follow through and let's keep it up. Let's share the knowledge, share the information on the card. I have a couple of extra cards if you want to take an extra one. And let's do what we can in this world that we have. Okay.